Good evening. Let me exit full screen, make sure my volume is turned all the way up. There we go. Oh. How's everybody this evening? Screen and weekly schedule. Here we go. All right, there's Dr. Barnes has joined us. Hey, how are you this evening?
Doing well. How about yourself?
Good. Are you following what's going on in Rowan County?
No. What's going on in Rowan County?
I'm sorry, Stanley County. I'm sorry. Stanley County. Do you remember Randy Mann was assistant principal in Charlotte Meck a long time ago?
The name sounds familiar, but I don't recall
Kind
the
of
face.
short. He ended up going to Cabarrus maybe. Last time I saw him was 2 or 3 years ago. He was AP at South Ireland up in Troutman. I had an intern up there, and he was AP. He got the job, that principal job at North Stanley High School last year. And he was at the beginning of his second year. That's the school where they had the controversy over the cheerleaders doing the political ad out on the ball field before the game.
I didn't hear about that one.
It made national news.
Wow.
Made national news. We talked to that was referenced last week. They did a campaign ad, and to what we were talking about last week, if you remember, we talked about that these things go viral. The one from Gaston County Schools with the assistant principal having sex with the student. That if you can't get off the news cycle,
yes.
Well, the one in North Stanley, the cheerleaders did in uniform at the ball field on the school property, did a political campaign ad and posted it on Facebook. Well, of course, Q Tucker at North Carolina High School Athletic Association did what she was supposed to do. They canceled the game that Friday night. I think it was the Thursday night, the JV game, they did this. So they canceled the Friday night game over the community uproar and furor. And the school didn't take any action against the cheerleaders. I think they might have actually sanctioned it. But the High School Athletic Association put them on probation. And of course, that bunch in North Stanley went crazy. And it went viral. It's been on the news every day since I guess Thursday before last. So this week, they have all of a sudden made a startling discovery that the principal there, his talents are much needed over at the STEM school. And so he's now an administrator, and that's in quotes, at the STEM school over at Albemarle High School, which means I guess they bucked him back down to AP until you get a 2-year contract as a principal until his contract runs out, and I guess he'll be a free agent again. But they couldn't get off the news cycle. Groups from across the country picked it up. I don't know what his role in with this was, if anything, if he knew or supported, but they couldn't get off the news cycle. And so let me see if I can, while we're waiting to get started here, see if I can find that one.
Beverly just posted it in the group chat.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. And let me find my weekly schedule. All right, let me see what I've got on group chat. Yeah, here it is. Let me see if I don't know if this will show up if I open it or not. If it'll show up. And so here's what they did. Can y'all see that? So they've served their probation for 1 week, and they're off probation. And can y'all see that political ad?
Wow.
So they did that at the ball game, which is, of course, against state law. Currently investigating. The district is taking a lot of heat on social media. High School Athletic Association dinged them. They'll be fined for that. And so, you know, this is not about which side you're on. You can't do political ads. You have to follow law and policy. Obviously, this is not. This doesn't follow law and policy. And when that happens in your school, and you can't get off the news cycle for good or for bad, this is what I was talking about last week. Somebody has to go. So, let's see if I can find my Chrome here and see if I can Google this right fast. Here it is right here. Stanley News and Press. And here is pleased to announce that Dr. will be again a new assignment beginning Monday, October 14th. After assessing county needs and evaluating Dr. Mann's skill set, we found it best that he begin an administrative position to assist with Stanley STEM Early College and Albemarle High School. And so, and then the accompanying article, he'll no longer be principal, be assigned to administration position. I'd say that'd be an AP position. He didn't even get his first contract out. I don't know, again, and I'm saying this I want everybody to hear this. I'm not talking about this ad, either way, either side. What I'm saying is state law and board policy was broken at a school. Don't know what the principal's role was in that, if any. Didn't get out in front of it. Maybe the district wouldn't let him comment on it, or maybe, I don't know that, but he couldn't get off. They couldn't get off the news cycle. It grew every day, got worse and worse. High School Athletic Association had to get involved to the point where less than 10 days in, he's no longer there. And so this past Monday, he had to show up at a new job. That's what I was talking about last week. The cover up, these things happening at your schools, the cover up, the inaction, not following law and policy. I don't know this. I don't know that he did, but what I do know is if you can't get off the news cycle and you're not squeaky clean, your number of years or that you're new or that's immaterial. The Gaston County situation, that one has gone uncharacteristically quiet because of the community that they're in. That person was not from that community, which has kind of quietened it down. But there's still, I don't know what's going to. I'm not pulling for anybody to lose their job. But there, the questions come: how did you not know this, or why did you not act, or why was not policy followed? Those kinds of things. But what you have to understand when these incidents occur on your campus, if you're not out in front of it, if you're not squeaky clean, if you didn't follow law and policy, and you can't get off the news cycle, it will not end well for you. It just won't. So that I knew him as an AP in Charlotte Mecklenburg. I think I probably trained him. I saw him again a couple of years ago, or 2 or 3 years, I guess 3 years ago at South Iredell. You know, getting his career started, his first real job, and before he could even settle in, hardly, it gets away from you. And so it speaks to tonight's lesson as well. You got to know law and policy, and you've got to follow through, and you've got to be in charge, and you've got to get out there and do the things that you need to do and be proactive. Just because ignoring it and claiming plausible deniability won't help you either. I'm going to give the principal in North Standing the benefit of the doubt that he didn't know. That won't save you either. The notion of plausible deniability, well, I didn't know what they were doing. Well, was nobody not supervising them at the ball game? You saw they were at the ball game, on the track, at the football field, in their uniforms. Where were the adults? Absence of supervision. If nothing else, the photo tells me there was an absence of supervision. What have we talked about? This course is about creating three things: a legal master schedule, duty roster, and supervision schedule. Duty rosters during the day. What is the supervision schedule? It's in the evenings at ball games. Now, if your supervision schedule was being followed, that ad would never have happened. I'm not talking about who the ad's for or against. That's not the point. We don't do ads for either side. That's against state law. It's also against local board policy. Obviously, there was an absence of supervision. So if nothing else, they demoted him, moved him based on absence of supervision. If you don't have a supervision and schedule in place, one, or you have one in place but don't monitor it to make sure that it's happening, this is the kinds of things that happen. There's no denying that those are their cheerleaders in their school uniforms at their school football field. I mean, that picture tells me all I need to know. Absence of supervision. Couldn't get off the news cycle. Somebody has to go home. Or as we used to say in Charlotte, there must be blood. That's just the way it goes, folks. I hate it, but that's how the world is now. Another example this week of this is how it is. Now, tonight, for this week, I had you attend an IEP meeting. Who was present? Who was in charge? What was the decision made as a result of the meeting? All right, that's the first thing I want to cover tonight. You understand that the IEP process is a collaborative process when you get to the meeting. Now, school staff is responsible for all the paperwork, the Deck 5, the IEP, the reeval, all. If there's a manifestation determination, functional behavior assessment, the school staff is required to do that paperwork. But once you get to the meeting, it is a collaborative process. Everybody gets input into the decisions that are made. That's the takeaway. That's what I wanted you to learn about going to an IEP meeting, is that parents have rights and their voice must be heard in that meeting. You just can't make decisions in absence of them. Now, if they don't go along, you can always sue the parent for not, for not following up, but it has to be a collaborative process. But parents have rights. To that end, in under week 8 Zoom session, you'll notice that one of the documents that I have for you, if I can find it here, I've got to switch over on my, I'm going to bring this back up. Here we go. Is this website that I've got for you? Am I still sharing that? Okay. Parent information and resources. This is the website from the federal government that tells you that's for parents, the 10 basic steps in special ed, tells you how you become eligible. And it goes through the 10 basic steps involved. And these are the same ones that I'm going to cover tonight. Key terms, parents' rights under IDA. What is IDA? Individuals Disability Act. There's the website for that one as well. It's also linked in on our page. Parent participation, evaluating children, special education services, about everything that they need to know. And you have to give them this handbook and this website. So they are partners in this process. Now, the good thing about an IEP meeting and all the paperwork from the principal's perspective is you have paid staff to put all this stuff together. You have exceptional children's teachers. You have an exceptional children's department chair. You have a coordinating teacher or a CT or compliance technician, whichever version of that your district calls it. Now, they may not be at your school. They may have 2 or 3 schools. And then you have the central office staff up to including usually a director of special ed or an assistant superintendent for special ed. All of those people are in the hierarchy. Now, if something goes wrong in this process, those people are in the chain of command, but the negative publicity is always going to come back to your building, even though you weren't responsible. So my argument is although this is not, the IEP team is not a school-based committee, and that's a state designation, SBC. Although they are not an SBC, a school-based committee, and there are other persons responsible for the paperwork, the reevals, all of those things, the head count. If there's a negative publicity, it will come back to you as a school. So for that reason, one of the members of that team, of course, is the LEA representative, either you as principal or you as assistant principal. Either an assistant principal or a principal is required to sit in that meeting for that reason, to understand and to know what's going on. You may not be responsible to do the paperwork, and there may be other people who will bear the brunt of the blowback if the paperwork's not done correctly. But if this thing goes badly and you get a parent on the news, they're going to mention your school's name, not the EC department. This is one of those. So you've got to, although you're not in direct line of responsibility for exceptional children, you certainly bear the brunt of the political pressure and the public relations nightmare that can come from that. And so I said that to say this: you better bone up on exceptional children. I've had way too many people say, well, that's the EC department's problem. I don't need to learn any of that stuff, until it blows up at your school. And then you don't know anything. And again, you can't get off the news cycle and you get a new job if you're lucky. Otherwise, you go home. And so 10 basic steps in special ed. Wonder how a child becomes eligible. I mean, and so this is how the system works. Now, we have to interject our intervention team process into this, and I'm going to do that in just a minute because that is a school-based committee. But if you want to know how it works, and it goes through all these things, this picks up after the intervention team or MTSS process. Everybody knows what MTSS stands for, multi-tiered system of support. That's 90 days prior to the 90 days that it takes to evaluate a child for exceptional children. So let me run through that quickly. Once a child has been referred, the 90 days actually starts. The first 30 days for the EC testing process is 30 days of anecdotals, that's just observing the kid, 30 days of the first level intervention, an assessment, and either more of that same intervention or a different intervention for the third 30 days. And at that point, a testing decision is made. That's the 90-day official federal process for a child to get tested for exceptional children. I've just summarized it for you. Now, in North Carolina, schools are required to have a multi-tiered system of support, which is 90 days prior to that. And so that was the second part of your task this week, was to go to an intervention team meeting. Interview the chair or member of your school intervention team. This is the school-based committee, and I keep making that same reference. School-based committee for a reason, and I'll tell you in just a second. This is the school-based committee that receives referral from teachers concerning students that are having academic or behavioral problems. Outline the official 90-day process that students go through prior to an EC testing decision. That's what I just did. And also determine if your school employs the 3-tier intervention. Everybody has to starting this fall. So the official 90-day process is 30 days of anecdotals, 30 days of intervention, 30 days of second or more of the first intervention. Prior to that, there has to be 90 days now, and that's MTSS. That's the intervention team. So now when a referral comes in on a kid having behavioral or academic difficulties, it goes to the intervention team, not the EC people. And you do 90 days with the kid before you refer them to the EC, and then they do 90 days. So now it takes 180 days to get to where a child is tested for exceptional children's services. Let me say that again. It now takes 180 days. 90 days by state decree, 90 days by federal decree. The 90 days by state decree is MTSS, multi-tier system of support. That's a school-based committee. The 90 days at the federal level, that's exceptional children's program. Now, why I keep saying SBC? Who do you think is responsible for that 90-day intervention program? What if it goes wrong? Who's in charge of that? That would be you, the school administration, the school principal. There is no EC department there that to be the fall guy. The intervention process is solely the responsibility of the school staff and school administration. If it goes wrong, you can't blame the compliance technician. You can't blame the EC people. You can't blame somebody at the central office, some functionary there. It lies at the principal's doorstep. If that 90-day process is not carried out with fidelity, and that's determined that it wasn't, that rests back with you. So, in 2014, in August, we could Google it from the Charlotte Observer, 11 elementary principals were either retired or demoted in August, right before school started in Charlotte, Mecklenburg. You want to know why? Because they found that they were not running their intervention teams. They were, when African American males were being referred for difficulty, they were having them tested within 2 or 3 weeks. They, not only were they not going through intervention, they weren't even going through the federal process. They weren't getting 90 days, they weren't even getting 9 days. And they were getting EC tested in all places EC. No interventions, no nothing. Of course, the principals claim they didn't know that. Again, who's the intervention process? Who's it come back to? It comes back to you in the school building. So the intervention process, and I've got one in here that kind of summarizes it in our week 8 Zoom. It speaks to the intervention process, and this one is in Cumberland County, and they do the 3 tiers of MTSS, and it goes through and explains it, what has to be done. And she even said, "Ooh, that's a lot. Thanks for reading." But this is basically the standard version of MTSS, where a kid is referred. You try interventions. You do something like response to intervention. That's what RTI is, where you do prescripted lessons. You regroup kids, and the ones that are having difficulty in the same area, you do prescripted lessons for them. I told you the story of the local elementary school that asked me to come in and do a program evaluation as to why their RTI program was not producing better reading scores. They've been stuck on 80 for 3 years in a row, and they've been doing RTI. And I came in and I looked and I watched, and I talked with their RTI coordinator, and I asked her how often she got in the classroom to make sure that those scripted lessons were being delivered with fidelity, those remedial lessons. And she said she didn't have time to do that. That wasn't what they paid her for. She said she kept a log. Teachers just wrote down when they did them. but she never went to see them. And so I went back and told the principal, you don't have an RTI program. You got an RTI coordinator, but you don't have an RTI program. I said, I'll guarantee you those lessons aren't being taught because nobody's going to check and make sure. So when they divide them up, some of them taking the kids out for PE, the ones that, the one that the teacher that has to stay behind and do that lesson just passes out worksheets or tells them to sit quietly, gives them some busy work and grades papers. Ask the kids what's going on. And that was actually what his feedback to me was, is they're doing worksheets during that time. Or just as much malpractice, they do the same lesson they did the first time that the kids didn't get. They just give them more of the same. But you're supposed to do a 90-day process of scripted lessons, trying different interventions. And again, it's here. But the important thing to understand for a law class is, number one, what is the content of what we're supposed to be delivering? And number two, are we delivering? And if we aren't, it's on me. And understanding what is the content, what is the 90-day process for exceptional children? Are we delivering that? It's not on me, but I'm going to get the blowback when the negative publicity comes, when the parents standing across the street talking to the news media across the road over there. They're not going to say it's the county's EC department that hosed me. They're going to say it's the school. And so you need to know the content of your district's MTSS program, their intervention, how your intervention team works at your school, what the process is. Are you using RTI? Are you using some other program to reteach scripted lessons to these kids? What are the levels? What are the tiers? What is the process? Who monitors it? Make sure it's being delivered with fidelity, the way it's supposed to be. Because that's on you. You better know what's going on. And I'd keep an eye on the EC people as well, especially on reavals, making sure that they're done in the right time frame. If not, those kids drop off the head count and you don't get paid for them. And that causes a problem. And so make sure you read through this one to get an idea of how it's supposed to work, and then compare that when you go talk to your intervention team chair. How does MTSS or your intervention process work at your school? You need to know that. There is some variation. You need to know what it is. All right. So those were our 2 activities for the week. I've got some other things. Remember, next week we have no class, and we have case study 3 when we come back on the 30th, and I'm going to cover that later tonight. So let me move away from that. Again, let me close that. I've got some websites. If you don't know what Individuals Disability Act is, I've got this link. You can just Google IDA, and it will speak to that. And Exceptional Children's Law, Public Law 94-142, every child gets a free and appropriate education. That's exceptional children. This is what IDA leads to Section 504. So you have EC and 504 kids. They basically get the same. There is a little bit of difference, but they basically get the same treatment, and they get the same resources for your 504 kids and for your EC kids. But everybody understands EC, and you can read the parent handbook, but you need to make sure you understand IDEA as well. And here's the history and the purpose. Again, I won't spend all the time tonight going on to that. But when we say EC 504, they're not the same thing. The laws are very similar, but we have to treat them pretty much the same in the school business in terms of what rights they have, in terms of what services they get. So you need to make sure everybody always knows to look up EC, but don't forget 504. That's why I have this. Don't forget your IDEA kids as well. They have the same rights as those EC kids have. Now, they don't get exactly the same services, That's according to your school and school district. We're doing law. Law says they get the same thing as 504. I mean, 504 gets the same thing as EC. That's what I want you to understand. For some reason, there's misinformation out there that 504 kids, you don't have to do anything with them. Yeah, you do. They get those same legal protections as exceptional children, as EC kids do. That's where a lot of people fall down. They know what EC gets. They don't know that 504 gets the same thing. They don't know that there's a difference between EC and IDEA kids, which are Section 504 kids. There are some differences, but for your purposes, you have to give them the same. You have to give them the same rights in your building. So you need to understand IDEA and need to understand exceptional children. You need to understand your intervention team process at your school. That leads to both of those.
Dr. Lamb,
yes.
I'm so sorry, just for a moment. One of the things, yes, it is absolutely critical that you know it, but one of the things I want you to also think about is how you're going to make sure that you know that your teachers know these things as well. Not assume. I will obviously not get into any details, but 20 some years ago, I really got burned on this because I didn't know, and that's no excuse. So definitely make sure that you have a plan, not only for making sure you have this knowledge, but that the teachers in your building have this knowledge too.
Thank you. Thank you. You have to become the teacher for your staff. Thank you, Dr. Sumner. That's exactly right. Now, I know Dr. Barnes, I know she does some workshops for her people. She has to. We always did. I'm sure she runs those now.
Absolutely. We've continued to do those. You started that process for us in the district, and we've just continued it to make sure that we do the training for 504 and EC actually at the same time, so they can stand side by side to talk about the differences and what the expectations are. But they are, like you said, the exact same.
That you get the same rights. And so we started those years ago, and we even did sessions for teachers at night in the evenings. For principals that didn't feel comfortable, that didn't know enough, we actually did some workshops for them. Betty used to do those when she was in charge of 504. Ralph used to do some 504 and some ECs in the evening as well. I did them. We all did different ones in terms of training administrators, but then we also did teachers. Since I've been in this role with Gardner Webb, I've done staff development at a couple of high schools in Guilford County that had me come in and talk about these things where we went through all these laws. I don't have the time to do this in this class. This is a whole day or 2 days. This is like 12 hours worth. And that's why I said, here are the websites. You need to become aware. But understand that you don't become aware as an administrator just for your own edification. You've got to then teach this to your staff. And so to that end, what I have for you is a couple of documents. One of them is this. This is a PowerPoint you use with teachers. Yes, this might help you, but this is, as you can see, is aimed at teachers. This is one of those kinds of things, and this is an old one that I made a long time ago that I used with teachers to teach them the difference between the inclusion model that we're doing now and a mainstream model where the kids have classes, and so separate classroom, but in regular as per the IEP. And so mainstreaming is when you let the kid out part of the day, but he's in his EC class. When we were moving to the inclusion model where he's in regular class all day, teachers didn't understand the difference. So you can see it's not that old. I mean, that's how many years ago did we go to this model that we went from the mainstream model? They were self-contained. They were all in EC classes all day. And then we went to a mainstreaming model where they got out some of the day and they only had some special ed classes and some. And then we went to the inclusion model where they're in all regular classes, and we take the help and support the EC teacher goes to that room. And so when we went from the mainstream model to the inclusion model, we had to bring our staffs along with us. And I made this one to do a staff development again. I think I did this one in Guilford County as well. I'd made this one to work with teachers. I did some work at Northwest Guilford. I did some discipline, due process. EC did some different workshops for Ralph there. Ralph Kitley's a great guy. We had interns there forever. And when I worked out of Statesville, obviously that was my area for Gardner Webb, was the Triad area. And that was one of our collaborative partners. You have collaborative partners around the counties surrounding your colleges or your buildings, your collaborative partners, and we do staff development for them. I've got a couple coming up later this year with our collaborative partners, a couple in South Carolina and one in North Carolina in Kannapolis. And so this is a PowerPoint that made to help them understand, again, to Dr. Sumner's point, well taken, not just you to understand it, you've got to do something like this to help them understand it as well, because they're the ones going to make the mistake that hangs you. Because you usually know, or you got somebody you can call and that. It's usually the teachers that leads you down the garden path. So that's exactly what this is. This is a PowerPoint that I developed some years ago, not that many, where we explained to them the difference when we were transitioning from mainstream classes, which meant that the kids came to some classes by themselves, and when they needed academic help, they stayed self-contained in the teacher's class. We went from the model where they went to all classes, and the teachers went to the academic classes. So that was the difference. And so we went through this and explained it all to them, how it all worked, and a little research behind it. Now, this thing is long. That's why I said this is a day. This takes all day. This is 63 slides long. This is a all-day presentation. This is not a quick and dirty 15 minutes. This is a full day staff development, 6 full hours of instruction, 63 slides. So, you know, this is what I would do if I was principal now, and I did this. And when I was in central office, I did this. You got to bring the teachers along. Now, one of my students from that part of the world, she was actually in Winston when we used to teach at the old bank building in Winston. I had an EC coordinating teacher for Guilford. No, she was in Winston-Salem, Forsyth, and she did a little quick and dirty for me for teachers as well. We call it Gen's 10. And this is for a school-based beginning of the year reminder, where you spend an hour at the beginning of the year. That first day, that first required work day, that you got things, staff development all day. This is one of those 45 to 50 minute segments, sometime during that day, hopefully early in the morning, of the 10 hottest things to remember for your teachers as a reminder. Now again, this is not an all day. This is a 45, 50 minute deal where you hit the hot spots. And basically what Jen is telling them is you're not going to get away from exceptional children. 10 million children have special needs. And that was 12 years ago, 13. It's probably almost double that now. So the first thing, you tell teachers is this is every day. This is not something extra. This is everyday part of the job. That's what you explain to them. This notion of why do we have to do this? We're always going to have to do this. This is part of it. And then Education of Handicapped Children Act 75, least restrictive environment, covering that, what that really means. Civil rights of special needs children, and that's, FERPA. And I've got that website up for you as well. This is federal law that protects children and their rights. Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. That's basically their civil rights. That's That's what that refers to. Remind them of, don't be talking in the lounge. Don't be sharing information. When people come and ask questions, make sure they're the actual parent or guardian. We don't talk to relatives or friends from the neighborhood, all those kinds of things. Again, we cover IDA. You get the same rights as EC. Again, we spell that out, the things that have to be done. And we basically, and we could update this one with MTSS, the intervention process as well. But basically, you have to cover this at the beginning. I would cover it twice a year. I'd cover it beginning of the year, and then we came back for second semester and had a work day. That work day we normally have around President's Day or whatever it is in the winter semester. I'd cover it then too. I'd make sure that we hit it twice a year to remind teachers. So this is a 50-minute one where you can get pretty deep into it. This is an all-day one. And you can develop others like this. But Dr. Sumner's exactly right. The argument tonight is you got to learn this stuff. But because you're responsible, school-based committee means you got to teach them. You can't expect them to come already prepared. The EC department, it's their responsibility to train their people. But it's your responsibility to train your people, because intervention leads into this now. So you've got to make sure that you cover the intervention piece, and you can cover whatever model you're using at your school, whether it's inclusion or mainstreaming. You're going to be doing one or the other. That you cover that with your staff as well. You can't depend on somebody else, because when it blows up, it's going to come back on you. So those are the two documents tonight that are most important that you need to understand. You need to have a 45 to 50-minute reminder at the beginning of every semester during the work days, and that you need to have a full day of staff development at least one time a year. You need to have a full day of staff development on this stuff. Intervention into whatever services you have for exceptional children. That's most important. That's correct. Dr. Sumner, Dr. Barnes, I'm going to give you the opportunity to, if you have any stories that you'd like to share with us about exceptional children. I've carved out a little bit of time. I know both of you have expertise in the area. Is there anything you'd like to share at this time?
Dr. Barnes, if I may, I think Dr. Lamb, before you brought up something really interesting in terms of our different perspectives. So much of my work is with more smaller, more rural districts, and Dr. Barnes is with some of the, like, working with a larger district. And one of the things that I found is it's sort of like planning a small wedding. All the things still have to happen. But in a smaller district, you often don't have a lot of these procedures and protocols in place. And so the smaller the district and or the higher the turnover, the less likely that you're going to have some of these things in place, and you're going to be expected to walk in knowing them. The other thing that came to mind earlier when we were talking, it's the same idea, a public information officer. Some of our districts that do a really good job of making it seem as if the story gets buried and we're not hearing as much about it, they might have a really stellar public information officer who in turn has really spent a lot of time supporting principals to make sure they understand what needs to be shared and what doesn't, and that they get ahead of the game, and they have really good relationships with local media. So Dr. Barnes, not to color our conversation anyway and steer it one direction or the other, but I think it's interesting the difference between kind of larger and smaller districts in terms of some of these protocols.
Well, I would say that it doesn't take away from them knowing the information. It's just that we have more people in place to follow back up to say, hey, here's where you went wrong. And so we've even added EC coordinators within the learning communities. But that, again, it still goes back to the school. Normally, by the time I found out that a school has messed up, it's because we have an Office of Civil Rights situation where they're
Mm-hmm.
contacting me to say, well, what took place at this school? So then we have to start back at the school and find out, okay, well, what took place as far as the investigation is concerned. Even with the media, we definitely, I think that we have a decent relationship with the media, but our communications department will let you know that they are not going to try to cover anything. If it goes wrong, they're going to the school, and we're going to start back at the school. So that's kind
Um,
of the way it takes place for us.
yeah, I mean, media is a two-way street. You know, if you try to cover things up and they find out and
Yeah,
they lose trust. I mean,
yeah,
we had a superintendent when I was first in Charlotte, John Murphy, who was notoriously bad on the media, and we had a reporter for the Charlotte Observer and one for Channel 9 who that was their full-time job, was trying to find dirty stories on the district until he finally left because he had made them so angry. It took a lot of years to try to build relationships back up, but you know, and still, even in the larger districts, you have a lot more people to help you do this stuff, but it won't get covered up when it comes back to you. That's exactly the problem in the small districts is you don't have that much help, and this is kind of always my. I think I've covered everything I wanted to tonight. Let me double check before we get to the case study, but my story is this. I worked in 2 rural districts, and especially when I was in Burke County. I had a large elementary and a junior high on the same campus, and I had over 1,200 kids there. Before we split and built the new middle schools, I had an elementary and a junior high. And I had one part-time assistant principal to help me with evaluations in the junior high, and that was all the help I had. And when I say that's all the help I had, that's all the help I had. And he only came certain months and did evaluations because we were career development pilot system and we had to do so many formal observations. And he came and helped with those. I was thinking about him today. His name is Norm Noe. And Mr. Noe was about as old as Noah. And that's all. He was a retired principal that came back and did evaluations. But that's all he did. He didn't do anything else. And so if the lunchroom lady was out, I had to put on a hairnet and serve lunch. If the bus driver was sick, I drove the bus. If the custodian was out, I had to go take that stuff and get the vomit up. I hate the smell of that stuff. Y'all don't not old enough to remember the stuff you used to have to put on vomit in schools. Looked like fertilizer, but it smelled worse. I hate the smell of it worse than the vomit. And the idea here is I didn't have anybody. And you had to do all this stuff on your own. You didn't have 1,000 people to help you or to fall back on or to check behind you or to help you with compliance. You had to do everything yourself. Juxtapose that to when I got to Charlotte and you had plenty of help. But the stakes were much higher there in that you couldn't mess up because the media scrutiny there was if something went wrong, and that's what I was pointing out, even at North Stanley, a place that's pretty rural now, but because of media and social media, that's become a national thing, principal couldn't withstand it. If nothing else, lack of supervision at the ball field allowed these students to do that. He couldn't withstand the media and he's gone. That's the way it is in Charlotte every day. And so you can't get it wrong. In the smaller districts, they tend to be more forgiving and helpful as long as you stay out of the media. But once you get to the media, all bets are off. And that's one of the things people think, well, my uncle's on the school board or my cousin. When the media gets on you, they get off of you. And that's the people that hired you. They have to. That's just the way it works. And no matter how rural the district now and how little help you got, once the media, especially the national media and the internet media, Twitter, Facebook, when the media gets on you now, or if they send somebody from, one of the large media markets, 2 or 3 counties over to get you, once they show up, if you can't make it go away, if it won't go away, then it won't go well for you. I mean, you're not going to have the luck of Gary Condit. And that's my last story of the night. Gary Condit was a congressman who was suspected of killing a young girl that he was having an affair with. Her name was Chandra Levy. And they found her murdered, and he was the prime suspect. He was a congressman. I think he was from Colorado. And just before they were getting set to arrest him, the day before, 9/11 happened. And in the confusion of all that went on over the next few months, his term expired. He went home to Colorado and refused to come back and answer any questions. But you know, it took planes being driven into buildings and thousands of people dying. That was his reprieve. He got to go home. Still believe that he had something to do with that. But you're probably not going to. Don't be praying for another 9/11 to get you off. I've told you, and you know, I'm not a good person. I'd be hoping that, you know, there'd be a bank robbery or somebody get, you know, shot, just winged a flesh wound on the west side so we could get off the news, because we knew if we didn't get off the news cycle that something bad was going to happen to a good person. North Stanley couldn't get off the news cycle. Obviously, the picture itself proved a lack of supervision. New principle. That's the way it goes in this business, folks. You've got to not only know the law yourself, but you've got to make sure your faculty does. It's your responsibility to teach them. 2 documents I have tonight, you need to make better ones than them. One, you need to have a primer at the beginning of every semester of hot spots, things that you need to make sure you remember this semester, about 45 minutes worth. And then once a year, you need to have something like this that explains the MTSS process or the EC program that you're running. I made this one when we were moving from mainstreaming to inclusion. This is for a faculty. This is an all-day 6-hour. You need to have both of these in your toolkit. You can use these just as examples because you probably need something newer or better. Both of these are 5 or 6 years old. But this is the kinds of things that you've got to have. And so the argument that Dr. Sumner was making is exactly my argument tonight. You got to take this. It's got to be portable. You got to take it and work. It's up to you to make sure your faculty knows this stuff. So that's the conclusion of that. I did finish with the 10 minutes that I wanted for us to talk about case studies. Let me close out some of these sites and get back to my case. All right. So in 2 weeks when we meet again, remember we're not on next week. Next week is fall break. So when we meet again, according to our weekly schedule on October the 30th, we're going to do case study 3. All right, let me look and see what's coming in on chat. And Lan says that very intensive training. She works in Cumberland County schools. Much documentation is needed for MTSS. That's exactly right. The reason I showed the one on the MTSS process from Cumberland County, it's very comprehensive. But yeah, it's the full-blown version. Some districts have adopted a lesser version, but that's the full-blown one. That's the full 90-day one. So that is correct. So when we get back together, case study 3. So let's look at that right quick. All right. This one kind of goes with what we've been covering up to tonight. The 4th one goes with what we were covering tonight. So this kind of ends our discipline, bullying, cyberbullying, sexual harassment. This case study goes with that. Tonight, introduction leads to our next case study. So this one goes back. It's kind of a culmination of what you've learned the last 3 weeks prior to tonight. on discipline, cyberbullying, sexual harassment, rights, and all those things. And so we are normal too. Jimmy and Willie are a couple. They are displaying inappropriate behavior in school. Wouldn't matter if it's a boy and a girl, or two girls or two boys, as in this case. Inappropriate displays of affection, not been dealt with. We've talked about that, and antecedent behaviors. And it's got the community riled up because kids are and parents are angry that you're not doing anything about these two. I think they're more angry probably because of the outward displays of affection, which are, again, against the rules that the school's not dealing with. So the school has now decided that they're going to deal with Jimmy and Willie. They're getting because they've got parents that are coming in and complaining. Parents are calling them names. They're basically bullying. What are you going to do with these? They're going to come to the prom now. They're going to come together at the prom. What are you going to do? And so Mary Lou calls the boys in, and she tells them that for their own safety, that she's not going to let them come to the prom. So the questions is, would you consider her comments a veiled threat that, she's telling them that they could be hurt? What are her responsibilities under the law? How should Mary Lou respond to concerns of Cindy and Jerry Hudson? And should she allow them to come to the prom? Now, for the first question, make sure you read about heckler's veto. That's in your reading. Heckler's veto. Make sure you read about that in your Principal's Guide to School Law. What is heckler's veto? You know what a heckler is? Somebody that yells and screams and acts a fool in public. Heckles somebody like a comedian or somebody on the stage. Heckler's veto. That one. Read it and then answer that question. What are their responsibilities under the law? Equal protection under the law. What rights do gay people have? How should Mary Lou respond to concerns of Jerry and Cindy Hudson, who are not the parents of either Jimmy or Willie? Consider FERPA, F-E-R-P-A. We covered that tonight. Family Education Privacy Act. Can you be talking with one parent about somebody else's children? And then in the end, should Mary Lou allow Jimmy and Willie to attend the prom? So those are the questions that you have to answer for next week when you're in your groups, your presentation. But make sure that you understand these are legal cases. Do your research. Do your reading in the Principal's Law book. Use Bulldog 1 to do some research if you need to on what are LGBTQ laws in North Carolina. What protections? What are federal law? What federal protections do Jimmy and Willie have? Can the school ban them from the prom? Can the school talk to other parents about them? Can you invoke heckler's veto and tell them that they're going to get hurt and that you're just looking after their own safety? You're denying them to come to prom for their own safety. Can you do that? Is that a threat? So make sure that you cover all those things. Again, these are not opinion pieces. You need your discussions and your presentation need to be based and rooted in law and policy, because that's what'll save you. People may not like what you do, but that again, I don't know what the principal at North Stanley did or didn't do in terms of that issue. But I can see from the photo there was a lack of supervision. That's a violation of the policy of supervision was not upheld at that school. My suspicion is on the basis of that alone that you can be either demoted or relieved of your duties. Simply for that. As we say in the business all the time, they may get you, but don't give them the stick to beat you with. Don't make it easy. Follow the laws and policies. So all these case studies are not about what you think or feel or what your political or moral agenda is. And make sure you look at them in the context of the 4 ethical paradigms, and you know what those are: care, justice, profession, and critique. Make sure that you look at them in relationship to that. You know, look at the ethics of the situation as well. But look at the legal part of this. It's an interesting case. Okay. Look for one more. All right. Under Zoom session 3, lesson plan role, the principle of ethics. If you don't remember the 4 ethical paradigms, there it is. We covered it in Zoom session 3. We covered that. That's the law, 288, law for principles, with the 4 ethical paradigms that are also attached to your contract in North and South Carolina. Is you must maintain your ethical standards. So if you don't remember what those are, they're under lesson plan. They're lesson plan, role of the principal. That's under Zoom session 3. We covered that. So make sure that you factor the ethical piece into this as well. Care, justice, profession, critique. Those four ethics, 4 paradigms, ethical behavior. If you don't remember, look them up. All right. I see my time is up. Dr. Barnes, Dr. Summer, thank you for your input tonight. I knew that both of you would be invaluable. Both have great experience in this area, and you have it from different perspectives. So I think we covered it for no matter where you're located. Yeah, you should have gotten something tonight, whether you're in a big district, small, rural, urban. You got some good perspectives from them tonight. I'm really looking forward to your presentation in 2 weeks on Jimmy and Willie. They've become favorites of mine. And so I'm looking forward to your presentations at that time. Does anybody else have anything else for the good of the group tonight? Well, that was pretty easy. Well, thank you all for being with me this evening. Let's see how many we had. We had about 15 tonight. That was good. So thank all of you for being with me. I will see you in 2 weeks. Have a good break. Bye-bye. Thank you again, folks.